Hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Ben doçent doktor Ebru Yetişkin. Bugün Geert Lovink'le birlikte İstanbul Lab olarak düzenlediğimiz Bilim, Teknoloji ve Toplum Muhabbetlerinin ilkini gerçekleştireceğiz. Akban Sanat'a bize ev sahipliği ettiği için çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Çok heyecanlıyız. Bizler sıklıkla konuşmalar yapan, dersler veren akademisyenleriz, aktivistleriz. Ama bu etkinliği çok önemsiyoruz. O yüzden ilk başta size hem bilim, teknoloji ve toplum ile ilgili biraz bilgi, kısacık bir bilgi paylaşmak istiyorum. Hem de STS İstanbul'la ilgili bilgi vermek istiyorum. Ve tam olarak ne yapmaya çalıştığımızla ilgili kısacık bir bilgi vermek istiyorum. Bildiğiniz üzere gündelik yaşamımızda teknobilimsel yönden ihtilaflı çok fazla konu var. Yani ilk aklıma gelenler mesela işte deprem yahut işte denizlerin kirliliği, ormansızlaşma, kentsel dönüşüm yahut kişisel verilerin güvenliği gibi pek çok hem bilimsel hem de teknolojik yönden sorunlar yaşıyoruz ve bu sorunlarla ilgili çözüm üretme ve de bilgi üretme ve bunları tartışma konusunda da güçlükler yaşıyoruz. Bilim, teknoloji ve toplum muhabbetleri bu yaşadığımız gündelik sorunları bilim, teknoloji ve toplum literatürü etrafında kritik etmeye, sorgulamaya, başka türlü düşünmesine olanak sağlamaya çalışacak bir etkinlik. Yılda 4 kez düzenleyeceğiz ve de sürekli olması amaçlarından bir tanesi. Bundan sonraki konuşmada mercek altında bir laboratuvar konuşması olacak 18 Mayıs'ta. Onu da şimdiden duyurayım. Bugün ise şöyle bir format izleyeceğiz. Özellikle bilim, teknoloji, toplum konuşmaları gibi bir başlık koymadık. Dikkatinizi çekmiştir. Bilim, teknoloji, toplum muhabbetleri koyduk etkinliğimizin adını. Çünkü muhabbet sözcüğünün kendi aramızda konuştuk, önemli bir sözcük olduğunu düşündük. Bildiğiniz üzere muhabbet sözcüğü Habib kökünden geliyor. Sevgi demek. Dolayısıyla bu sorunlara ilgi duyan ve bunu önemseyen ve bu sorunlar etrafında konuşmayı, tartışmayı, düşünmeyi ve bunlarla ilgili çözüm üretmeyi seven insanlarla bir arada olmayı istiyoruz. Ve bir arada olmanın da çok önemli olduğunu düşünüyoruz. O yüzden bugün Geert'in burada olması, bizlerle olması ve bu çalışmaya destek vermesi bizim için çok önemli. Hepinize de bu vesileyle teşekkür ediyorum geldiğiniz için. Bugün şöyle bir süreç izleyeceğiz. Geert Lovink'in Sosyal Medyanın Dipsiz Kuyusu adlı kitabı 2016 yılında yayınlandı ve Türkçeye henüz çevrildi. Ve son zamanlarda sosyal medya ile ilgili okuduğum benim en kapsamlı araştırmalardan bir tanesi. Otonom Yayıncılık tarafından çevrildi kitap. Geert'in bu konuyla ilgili, sosyal medya ile ilgili ve eleştirel internet kültürüyle ilgili bir sunumu olacak. Fikirlerini derleyecek, bizimle paylaşacak. Daha sonra Geert ve ben kitaptan yola çıkarak muhabbet edeceğiz. Ve de sonra da 30 dakika kadar, 40 dakika kadar buna ayırıp daha sonra da sizlerle, yani bu konuşmalardan yola çıkarak, kitaptan yola çıkarak sizlerle muhabbet etmek istiyoruz. O yüzden etrafta bir mikrofon dolaşacak. Etkinlik video kayıt altına alınacak. O yüzden mikrofonu alarak hep birlikte bu konu üzerinde düşüncelerimizi paylaşabilirsek çok memnun oluruz. Bakalım neye ne kadar vaktimiz kalacak. Bu vesileyle tekrar Geert'e hoş geldin deyip sözü sana bırakıyorum Geert.
Thanks so much. And thank you all for coming. It's an amazing crowd on this holiday Saturday. So it's an honor to present my work here and to celebrate the publishing of the book. There are a few copies available here. Autonom Publishing is present, so that's good. After this presentation tomorrow, I will go to Ankara for a few days to do a book launch there and a couple of lectures. So I would like to give an update of the book. I finished the manuscript, and that's important detail, of course, in such cases, in a situation where everything changes so fast in my internet context, back in September 2015. So, yeah, it's about 2.5 years ago. Basically, of course, it covers a lot of different topics. I write essays and take you to, different places. But in the book, we could say there are, roughly speaking, 2 big topics that I deal with in the social media abyss. One is the critique of the social media and the question, are there alternatives and how should they look like? And then the second question is, if we criticize the free, if we do not want anymore that we have to give all our creative work and content give away for free, what are the alternative revenue models of the future? In short, how are artists and creative workers, precarious workers, going to make a living in the 21st century? So this is the second part. And in this small update that I'm going to give you now, I will try to deal with the 2 topics. Okay. So in the book, I describe the rise of the Unlike Us network. Remember, this is kind of the movement, let's say, from the movement of the squares, Gezi Park, but also Occupy, Arab Spring, etc. All right. So basically, the situation in 2011-13, and then and I follow how these social movements have used the social media, responded to it, and discussed, also the limitations. And for us, we try to update this in this Facebook farewell party, which we organized in Amsterdam now 3 years ago. Of course, in the last weeks, this has been, very much updated with the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal around Facebook. I've been very active in this so-called, delete Facebook hashtag, primarily on Twitter, but everywhere. We will never know how many people, will have left Facebook in this round, but I can only tell you it's never been as big as it ever was. So the social media critique has really become like a mainstream concern for so many people from so many different backgrounds, but also for different reasons. However, the question after the Facebook critique and the way it was selling the private data behind the back of ordinary users, of course, lies the question: okay, if you criticize Facebook, then how should alternatives in the future look like? Because this is really an important question also for the young generation, right? Facebook is already seen by teenagers as something, for very old pensioners, and so Facebook itself is already rapidly aging in that sense, in a literal sense. So the question really is, and I'm dedicating a whole chapter in my book to this, and to this question. Now, how much progress did we make over the last 3 years? This is really a question, and a legitimate one, right? I discuss a few of the alternatives in my book. The most famous one maybe being diaspora, but yeah, maybe, well, Putin got very angry this week about Telegram. There's that. There's Signal, of course. There's now an awareness that there are, more alternatives. Think also of DuckDuckGo, this really good now, very well functioning alternative for the Google search engine. And not so many people know about it, but I can tell you, after participating in it for a couple of years, the quality has dramatically gone up, and it is really a serious alternative for Google. Using the really sincere concerns people have that they don't want their private data to be sold behind their back to third parties. Okay, so now this is probably, this is kind of where the overview is of the more experimental free software open source initiatives for social media. Probably not many people will know this kind of stuff, and these names, they're all quite obscure probably, with the exception of the last one, Mastodon. Is now rapidly spreading and becoming very popular. The good thing about these experiments is that they are local and that they are federated. And with federation, the whole idea of federation is really something that, that we should further work on, theorize it. And because federation is really a concept for the future. When we federate, you know what a federation is, an idea established already in the 17th century, and then of course practiced also in the 18th century. The United States is a federation. The Netherlands was also at some point a federation of free republics, right? It is kind of an association of mid-sized networks. And these networks, so it is in a way the original idea of the internet, namely the internet as a network of networks. And this is the biggest problem, of course, when we're talking about the social media today, is their incredible centralization, right? In centralization in terms of we're using only one app, one website, and we're using immense big data centers that come with them. And with this centralization also comes centralized control. I don't only want to talk about Facebook here, because Google and so many others, they're in a way the same problem. And there are other countries that have similar services. Think of Russia, Iran, China, and so on, right? So this is by no means only, let's say, a critique of the Californian ideology. However, I'm coming from Western Europe, so so I'm in a way part of a colony of California. So yes, the problem is bigger, and this is a French initiative, and I really hope that many more initiatives, especially from countries like France and Germany, will come on board. Unfortunately, we don't hear much about European alternatives, and this is really important. But it's not on the agenda of Brussels, so we will have to do this ourselves. Okay. In this update, I also want to say a little bit about the things that I've been writing over the last, let's say, couple of years. You can also read this as maybe a table of content of my next book. Maybe, maybe not. I haven't decided yet. But yeah, here you can see some of the topics. This year, I will publish finally my collected ideas and writings together with Ned Rossiter on the second topic. So this will come out with Otonom Media, and this is my theory of organized networks. So we just recently finished that one. I kept on working on this whole social media question. I can't get away from it, right? It's very, very difficult. For most people, the internet is now synonymous to social media, right? They access the internet through social media, and very, very likely they will not leave that filter bubble, right? So if you do internet studies or internet critique, it's almost impossible to not speak about social media. But I really want to get away from the topic, but yeah, it's very difficult. Yeah, the third one is a bit more theoretical, let's say. The one there, media network platform, in which I described, the three important terms that play an important role in my life. The development from media theory to the networks to the platforms. This is a very, let's say, long-term change that we've seen over the last maybe 30, 40 years. But yeah, I was very, maybe not emotionally, but yeah, very personally involved in the writing of the last piece, in which it's called Distraction and Its Discontent. I published it 2 weeks ago. It's also available now in German and in Spanish. And it's about this whole question of being distracted. And I'm in this essay, which is very important for me, I try to go away from the pedagogical approach, like you are sick and you need to see a doctor because you cannot, get away from your smartphone. This kind of, medicalization of people that I think is absolutely not the way to go. So I also have, remarks there about digital detox as a kind of, a therapy. I believe that we should resolve this issue in a completely different manner and not treat each other as patients. Like you are sick and you need to see a doctor because you look too much on your phone. This is not the way to go. And this is kind of, what this center is doing. I'm not saying that this is precisely their agenda, but these are dissidents, the new dissidents of America. They are very high-level employees of Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple that have left and created this center. Center for Humane Technologies. It's based in Washington, D.C., and it's going to be interesting to see, what their agenda is. Now, they say they will primarily focus on this kind of subliminal influencing, right? But okay, we'll see. But in general, the debate is now very much overdetermined by Russiagate, fake news, etc., by the political class that is concerned about these issues. But 3-4 months ago, it was very much the concern about behavioral science and the tactical use of psychology, right? Why are these media so addictive? They're addictive by design. They've been designed to be like that. So that this debate, it will inevitably come back. Okay, now I want to say something about, this is an activity of us that is kind of ongoing, which is our digital publishing activities. We just got a grant from Applied Science Fund in the Netherlands. So we have money now to work for another 2 years on this. And if you want to come to Amsterdam and join us, have an internship or something like that, and join us on this, we are very open for this. So if you want to come, please join us. So this is in fact our main activity. We are a very small center. We are only 3 or 4 people in a room, so don't think of it, with like a big building or something. We're not like that. But nonetheless, I mean, we are very open to work with you. One of the things also that in a time in which we have less and less money, we're trying to focus on. This is one of our new projects, which is about the online self. So how is, because the online self is really, you can also read that when you see my essay on the distraction. The understanding of the self, the online self, is very, very important. Also for designers for the long term, right? And so last year we opened this new track, if you like, with this event, in which we, by the way, focused a lot on the selfie. So I like the selfie a lot, and so it's a very, very important entry to get into, let's say, the psychology and the cultures of use of online, of the internet. Okay, I said there is a second part, and that's the revenue models. This is the question of how we're going to make a living if we criticize the economy of the free. Okay, so this is a mural painting in Paris, and this is kind of now the dominating, let's say, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency ideology, right? Bitcoin will arise from the grave of the pound, the dollar, the yen, and the euro, right? This is kind of, and this is how, by and large, the reporting has been. And of course, this is now the reality, the sad reality for many. So this is kind of we have to reconcile that, and maybe in the next lecture I will show. I bought Bitcoin for 8,000 and sold it for 0 or something like that. We don't know. But okay, so this is kind of the reality of a speculative economy, of a Ponzi scheme that is about to implode, including this very strange phenomena which is related to it, which is called the pump and dump groups. Which is really kind of a not so well known, not so well reported kind of insider. It's a dark side. I mean, the cryptocurrency world has a lot of dark sides, right? But this is definitely one which is very cruel, a cruel one, because these are conspiracies of few people that bring in newcomers that have no idea. They bring up a price, they go out early, and then the price drops, and the people who participate in the pump and dump group lose all their money, right? It's kind of a very simple mini Ponzi scheme that can happen in 15 minutes, something like that. And there are some insiders that make a lot of money with it. So there is that side of the Money Lab project that we deal with. But the overall aim is also clear for us. And this kind of, this is a new service that was announced this month. It's not so important what Tipper is exactly, but the slogan, I think, is right? The past was about platforms earning, and the future is about people earning. The idea that there is a possibility, still is a possibility right now, to change the overall architecture of how money is going to flow in the future over the internet, over the networks, in a digital fashion, is open. And that's why so many people, especially young people, are involved right now, because they sense that this is going to be an important debate. Okay, the next Money Lab, number 5, is going to happen in New York in a couple of weeks from now. We just had one in January in London, so the initiative is now going more in an international fashion. We are also participating in this big event that the Amsterdam City Council is organizing in May. And there we more look at the let's say the dark side. And this is really about organized crime and the use of new digital money, which is already quite apparent in a city like Amsterdam, with, of course, where there is a lot of drugs money, money coming from everywhere around the globe, being invested in real estate and so on, right? Maybe you get the idea where this is heading. Also, if you take into account the Panama Papers and the Paradise Papers and so on, right? So there you get an idea about what we mean with illicit financial flows in the city. Okay, so I'll leave it there. This has been a very quick update from my side on where we are after the book was finished. So now we can go to the next part, and we will have the dialogue.
Well, we usually have a problem, Geert, and I would like to raise that problem first of all, because today we encountered with a majority of software illiterate social scientists, humanities scholars, and maybe to add activists, artists, and curators. So the situation is much like what Niklas Luhmann emphasizes. You say those interested in theory return to the classical authors back again. And current technical approaches in the humanities come from software studies, an emerging field of studies that emphasize the importance of understanding the role of algorithms. Indeed, it's a very problematic issue, especially for transdisciplinary research, because social science and humanities scholars lack technical knowledge, and software programmers, on the other hand, and coders are not aware of conceptual distinctions. So can you elaborate more on that? And you also talk about the disappearance of the object of study in social sciences and the hermeneutics crisis as well. We cannot study, we cannot make comment about the problem because we don't know the technical details of the problem, so we cannot actually discuss the problem other than ethical considerations or history of the problem. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, it's a structural problem. Let's say Virilio writes a lot about this. What happens when you accelerate, when phenomena reach, a kind of perpetual change at the speed of light. So where things are introduced, we don't even know what is introduced. They're spreading very fast. Cryptocurrencies is an example of that. Where not even the founders and the people who have instigated it have really an idea about the underlying ideas, let alone the first users or the general public. But it's scaling up anyway, and this is an issue, right? And this is a very fundamental issue for thinking. How can you think about an object when you start to look back, think, you look again, and the object has already changed, right? This is a classic issue, but this is precisely what we're dealing with here in my field. So how can you keep up? In my field, you're always, by definition, a historian. So someone like me, I am a historian because I document internet culture in a way, right? But how, if you don't want to only document correctly, but also want to anticipate and, let's say, create concepts that will be useful in the future or near future, how do you do all this? How you juggle? How you keep all these balls up in the air? And so this is a real issue. I think it's an issue for academics, but also for people in culture, and most of all, something which is of real concern in education, in really in primary school, high school, but in university, polytechs, wherever you go, you hear that teachers don't know anymore. There's a fundamental uncertainty.
You find it critical to hear the voice of technically attuned public intellectuals, because social scientists and humanities scholars or activists or curators or so on, if they do not have knowledge of, for instance, say a protocol or an algorithm, they cannot also talk about the social. And that's one topic that you discuss in the book. So what is social in social media? How do you define it?
Well, if you observe, how ordinary people try to just deal with all these new platforms, etc., you'll quickly see that for them there is no distinction between the social and the social media. So the idea that there, like with the 90s distinction, that there is a so-called real and a so-called virtual, that these two realms are two distinct realms. Well, the idea with social media is precisely that they are blurred, and that people can no longer distinguish between the two. So we cannot say, oh, I have a completely different life on the social media, and that I have another life, a parallel life in the so-called real space, right? This is, if only, it would be wonderful, but we would have to completely redefine social media if we would like that. I would love to have a parallel life, right? But why not? Why not have 1, 2, 3, 4 multiple lives? It would be wonderful, right? The social media are not designed for that. And there's a lot of, historical, marketing, all sorts of reasons why this is not the case. The social media are so successful because they have completely penetrated, or let's say colonized, shaped, designed the very busy social life people have, right? Social media assist people, for instance, in optimizing time. So that's why people are looking so much on their phone when they're in the elevator or just waiting for a bus, or because they have so many things they have to deal with, maybe kids, lovers, who knows what's going on elsewhere that they quickly have to deal with, right? So it is also about a compression of the everyday life. And that compression, to do multiple things and to optimize the time, that is the social.
Also, it is very important to highlight that in social media, social does not make a distinction between human and non-human, because once we say users, we can talk about some bots, for instance, as part of social media.
Yeah, this is kind of obvious because people are mediated to the social, to others, through these machines, interfaces, networks, and through in that process, yes, they encounter a lot of machines that will either assist them or guide them or distract them for that matter, right? Because this is what the whole distraction debate is all about.
So to understand the design of social media through algorithms, for instance, if a social scientist or if, let's say, a transdisciplinary researcher, let's say a researcher would like to work on or about social media, he or she or it needs to understand, for instance, the algorithmic infrastructure, so that it would become
but that's
possible.
difficult, and that's a real challenge. So there are a lot of people on the other side. So we are only talking about the handful of critical, let's say, academic scholars. However, they are already confronted with, also here in Turkey, everywhere, with an enormous army of marketeers, marketing firms, that work professionally with these social media, right? So we're kind of already talking to another part of the so-called creative class that, so to say, sits on the other side of the screen. And today, advertisement, and we all know that, of course, if you're in the business, advertisement is precisely that, right? Half of the global money that goes into advertisement worldwide ends up in the hands of Google and Facebook. Now, this is an enormous sum, right? And that sum, let's say, is distributed but also generated through all these new firms that are out there, which we often do not even recognize as such. In part also because they have very obscure names, in part also because there are very many of them, but also because they are very traditional. And so the whole advertisement, PR agency business is now precisely doing that type of work.
So we become the data objects.
Yes.
And when I share this with my students, for instance, they tell me, well, I don't care if my data is shared. So this is another generational, let's say, carelessness about the sharing.
That's the
but
privacy issue. For me, that's a very German issue. In the Netherlands, we are not so German. We are not so much focused. But
we are not German at all.
No. But of course, when you think of Europe and privacy, you think of Berlin. You think of and yes, a lot of the German legislation comes out of that, and that this has historical reasons, World War II, and so on. Right, so when we're talking in Europe about privacy, that's not just a random topic. In Europe, there's very strong reasons why people have this concern, and in other parts maybe they're less involved in it. However, privacy for me is often a problem of lawyers. It's a problem of the law, and it's also a problem, or has been made a problem of individual users. In my work, and in a lot of the Dutch projects, we emphasize, the more collective, the social parts of it. Namely, that privacy is not just a concern for you. But that there are a lot of possibilities for you to start to act if you come together. If you start, for instance, you have just started something, the STS collective. So when you come together, you can achieve so much more. And for me, the question in the whole internet debate is very much to emphasize also on that collective, cooperative, collaborative side, because there there are enormous possibilities also in Turkey, right? If you come together, if you organize, if you, in whatever way, right? It doesn't have to be in the traditional ways. No, we need to reinvent organization as such in this age of, the techno-social, as I call it.
I mean, let's make it clear. It's a matter of control, right? So no.
Yes, it is. It is a matter of control, but you can also say that there are still some possibilities, not always, and they're not always the same, to circumvent this control if you emphasize on a different aspect.
Certainly.
So if you define control only as control of the individual, tracking and so on, yeah, then also what you do is you voluntarily limit the collective imagination. And what I emphasize in my work is that there are still, and of course I know in Turkey there are less and less possibilities. I'm very aware of that, but we should look for new ways to come together. And this will not, be presented to you on a golden plate. You'll have to figure out new ways, to circumvent the current systems of control.
Millions of people have learned the importance of their data, and our data is being shared, and it's a problem. Due to this Facebook scandal, let's say, Facebook, Cambridge Analytica. Okay, when we look at the controversy, we see a social media platform. We see a university scholar. We see a private corporation which works with the scientists, and that scientist is also a partner of that private corporation.
Social science.
Social.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, psychology. Yeah, you're right.
Yes, there you go.
And we see another private company, which is, if I'm not mistaken, it's SLC. Military, a private military corporation. So I mean, even this scheme is giving us the picture of the level of the increasing level of the power relations. But millions of people have learned, or even they faced with this problem due to this online debates, let's say, with Mark Zuckerberg and the Congress, the U.S. The Senate. So this was a spectacle, I assume, so that this is a public understanding of technology, kind of, or the facilitator for the public understanding of technology, so that millions of people were not aware about algorithmic power. Upon Zuckerberg's responses about how they can improve their platform, safety, security, by machine learning algorithms, it's not hard to foresee the upcoming regulations and surveillance which will be administered by the collective collaboration of the state and the platforms. This would increase the intensity of control power. Who benefits when we're not quick to understand platform business models? Because we need to understand these business models.
Yeah, for that maybe we can consult Peter Sloterdijk and Slavoj Žižek, people who help us to understand what organized disbelief is, what it means, that very soon we will only have a cynical reading of what we see on our screens, right? Because very soon we will have the same response to our smartphone as we once had when we looked state television, right? So we know it's not true. We know it's propaganda, but we still use it, right?
Yeah.
So Yeah. So this is one of the big problems, and then one of the other problems there is, will we be able to circumvent that official, let's say, newspeak 2.0, so newspeak in the age of social media, or will they also be able to completely colonize, let's say, our private sphere? Mm-hmm. So our intimate conversations as well. Mm-hmm. And I think this is an important point. The fact that they will be able to control, what news is, and that news will so-called be verifiable and so on, right? So they will soon be able to completely, control that space. But will they also control our private lives? And this is yet unknown.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. This topic or this problem is also related with another problem, a critical problem that we have in science, technology, and society studies. It's the black boxing of technology. In STS studies, the black boxing of technology is a problem that we critically deal with. To cite, for instance, Bruno Latour, an STS scholar, black boxing is the way scientific and technical work is made invisible by its own success. So we cannot access what these platforms are collecting about us. We do not have any access about what these, for which purposes our data is used. So we cannot reflect on that, and we cannot develop technology, or we cannot intervene with the techno-scientific controversies. So this is a knowledge production problem as well, and this is also related with, if we do not know, we cannot imagine. So there's another problem of lack of imagination. So since I give you the example of software programmers and coders, they lack the knowledge of concepts from social sciences and humanities. And if we add this problem on top of that, the technical infrastructure is developed by the lack of imagination without using the humanities concepts. And so this is a way of algorithmic censorship, because we experience censorship in this country in so many ways. And here there's an updated version of censorship.
Yeah, one of the problems is, of course, that so far the social media ideology, to use the term, has been a facilitating technology there. Mm-hmm. So it was not top down, and it was not clear for many, not even for the insiders, let alone for ordinary users, how this manipulation really works. And we still don't know a lot, right? So we're at the very beginning only of an understanding of this. The scholar that in the internet context has written about this is Frank Pasquale, a legal scholar and author of the book Black Box Society. So if you want to, read how this notion of Latour or that STS notion is applied to the internet context, please consult Frank Pasquale. What we can demand is, of course, transparency in the sense of this stuff, becoming open source, becoming more transparent, right? But the current laws are not ready for that, and it would also mean, that big players would immediately lose their competitive edge. If people have to give away their algorithms, it's probably the end of their monopoly.
Well, this is one of the reasons that we found this independent research collective, Science, Technology and Society group, because even when we see researchers making research on social media are not aware of this. So who would criticize this and using which concepts and using which methodologies? Or else, if it's too academic for those who are not interested in the academy, it's the same thing for the activists, which is even worse, or for the media artists. So we need a critical outlook. Even
that's
for
why
those,
we have said from the beginning we need to develop our own social media architectures, and that's why I showed this this one place. This one, the activity pub, for instance, is a protocol. It's kind of the lowest possible level, So the transparency has to start from that level. You cannot, let's say, only demand a transparency of the top level. It doesn't work like that, right? You can only implement that if the lowest level is also transparent. And this is also a question where to start with this business. And that's why a lot of activists have come to the conclusion that you can only achieve this by going back to the drawing board, going back to the basics. We should not focus on the apps. We should go away from apps. We should go to the very lowest level and work there. Otherwise, it's only cosmetics what we do.
And this brings us to a techno-capitalist ideology and the reproduction of this ideology. And the updated version of colonialism, in a way. But in the book, there was one phrase that caught my attention, and I would like to ask you about this. You emphasize that IT-informed post-colonial theory of embodied networks and organization is overdue. But I think we need to work on the updated versions of colonialism today. For instance, I give you an example. And I shared this with Geert earlier. In a 2016 United Nations white paper, financial anthropologist and blockchain artist Brett Scott argues that, for instance, Bitcoin community has a tendency towards techno-colonial solutionism or techno-libertarian evangelism, which propose the digital currency as a solution to issues in the developing world. So Brett Scott also adds, escaping weak local institutions might help individual people, like us, but does little to empower the broader social majority who remain reliant on the existing systems. This is us again. Those who are most likely to seek escape, like us again, maybe, are social elites with high education, access to technology, and capital to protect. The rhetoric of cryptocurrency or new technologies, let's say, often articulated by startups and even has neo-colonial traces. So my point is, this is, once again, we encounter with a language problem, because these words like solutionism, for instance, or participation, both sides are using the same words, but we are missing the reproduction of ideological discourse here. So that's why codes are important. That's why infrastructure is important, because once we encounter how infrastructure is operating, we actually see we don't need the words then. Then we need the words to explain or to work with the programmers. So let me ask you, why do you think post-colonial theory is overdue, and do you agree with this? Or maybe we should not talk about colonialism anyway.
Well,
maybe this is an outdated concept, colonialism.
No, I don't think so. No, I'm more influenced by actually Mbembe's book on the post-colony, which influenced me a lot to really start to think about, the present forms of post-colonial internet, for that matter. And this is also why I wrote this chapter, for instance, on all the findings I did in a country like Uganda. So this is very, very important for me, because in a way the whole globe is immediately exposed to it. The idea that certain countries, are ahead or something like that, well, that's very relative, and these technologies are exposed to the globe immediately. Maybe the uptake is a little bit different. We could talk about new forms of let's say regional forms of new forms of colonialism, like the presence of China in Africa and so on, right? Or the presence of Turkey in Africa. I don't know. You must be aware of what's going on, right? Yes, there is a strong Turkish presence in Africa these days. And that's strongly felt. And this is experienced as a new form of colonialism, right? So we should not only think of the traditional form, let's say, of U.S. imperialism or U.S. colonialism, even though in this context, we often use Californian companies as examples. The way this operates is happening on a global scale, and the examples that I use are only examples.
Well, if we talk about, I understand the post-colonial theory is tagged, and it's in maybe in a closure.
Well, the problem there is
process.
that it's often only applied on identity.
Yes,
and not
yes.
on technology.
Yes, yes, exactly.
So this is one of the issues, and we think that, and you've seen, and maybe you've heard about it in the last Transmediale in Berlin. There was a first concise effort made by this largest, European festival to bring together critical theory of technology with critical theory of colonialism, and it was the very first time. But it's overdue. We need to make a start.
We often get the criticism of while in Turkey, for instance, while we are dealing with the real social problems here, you guys are talking about those technological advances, and it is not touching it is not changing our real life problems. And that is also related with this knowledge production among social scientists, humanities scholars, activists. I mean, there is no transdisciplinary collaboration of working together and responding to these real social problems altogether. And once we do not have that, we are exposed to the new media fetishism or new technology fetishism and its ideology, of course. That is what I mean with the updated version of colonialism.
Yeah, there's something to be said about that critique, and I take that very serious, because we need to understand that the social media question, although it affects, in Turkey, I'm not really sure. Would it also be like 80% or 90% of the population? How many people here have smartphones, mobile phones? Insane amounts, right?
It's more than 90%.
Yeah, so this is kind of to say that this is a marginal issue that no one concerns. I mean, we cannot make that claim anymore, right? This is really a universal a technology used by the vast majority of the people. However, there is a problem that we run into this trap of representation, that we think that if problems would be dealt with or would be represented on that symbolic level of the screen in a different way, social problems would be addressed differently. I don't believe that, right? I don't go there. I think this old type of, let's say, cultural studies, media studies,
Yes.
critique of the media cannot be applied to social media. It doesn't work like that, because it's not a space that is about gender, race, whatever concern forms of representation.
Well, if we just go out on the
If
street,
only.
it's the use of the word social media. Even if we go out on the street and ask, what is social media? People would immediately would say Facebook, Google, and the other big ones. But there are other social media platforms, and that's what you are talking about, and that's the alternative uses of social media and different infrastructures.
Yeah, or the quite specific ones focused on young people, dating sites, you name it, right? I mean, there is so much, and also the implementation of all this on professional levels, right? People cannot have a professional life anymore if they're not on these platforms. And employers even, require this. This is kind of, without that you don't exist. So, period.
You are one of the pioneers of tactical media, and I realized that in the book you refer more on strategies, the word, rather than tactic and tactical. Whereas we encounter with the word strategy in 46 pages, tactic-related issues were only mentioned in 15 pages. I mean, I'm aware of the fact that quantification does not explain everything, but I would like to ask you, is there a change in your research, or why did you prefer to refer more on to strategies? Okay. Is this a tactical way to...
No, it's not. Maybe there is an element of despair in that, in the sense that I sometimes don't know, who my activist friends really are. I think after, may I say, the cold turkey of, the Arab Spring and Gezi and everything, right? There is a growing uncertainty, okay, who are the alternative forces? Who are the players? And do we have anything to say anyway? How can we counter the rise of right-wing populism, which is also very dominant in my country, in the Netherlands. But no matter where you look, there's a rise of nationalism and neoliberal nationalism. So the question there is, yes, I maybe then withdraw to the strategic questions, because the tactical questions cannot be discussed without the players, right? If there are no actors and you are uncertain about the actors, then this is a problem. This is, for instance, something I encountered. Yes, for instance, with the question of the communities that we build up ourselves. Maybe all the topics that I mentioned here, INC, the Institute of Network Coaches, we build up these communities. There's the Money Lab community, around 500 people, the Unlike Us people who deal with the social media alternatives. There are about 800 of them. There's Video Vortex, which deals with online video, and so on, right? These are all, maybe not groups, they're quite mid-sized networks, let's call them like that, and let's not be pretentious, okay? So they're and they are working on the issues And this is really difficult. And I see that because in the last couple of weeks, right, we were just completely overwhelmed by this delete Facebook thing. And we just managed Monday to organize a meeting in 1 week time in Amsterdam. We came together with the Facebook Liberation Army. Okay, and we sat in a room like this, and we were with 25 people, and we had very, very good discussions about, where are we, if we get all this response and are asked, what are your alternatives? Yeah, what is our story? Where are we? Right? What do we have? What can we present in such a situation to the wider public? Yeah, because you're immediately backfired. Okay, you criticize Facebook, but you have no alternative. So shut up.
In those years, back in 2011, back then we were organizing Amber platforms, festival and conferences, and we realized that governments and corporations appropriated tactics, and they are, tactical operations were proposed as a resistant movement. But we realize that today platforms, governments, and corporations are moving tactically. So we ask ourselves, okay, maybe we need to learn from these business models and repeat them and reuse them and subvert it for another purpose, like for commons. So we developed another concept, paratactic commons, and since then I've been working on this concept. What do you think about the use of paratactical commons? And do you think it would be a useful concept to make a distinction among works, for instance, those works who use emerging technologies that work for commons, and those works that use emerging technologies but do not use the commons approach, but for instance, just to make money or just to make reputation for themselves. So we need to make a distinction among these works too.
Yeah, but then again, as I said, half of our work is dedicated to the question of how the precarious creative class can make a living. So the idea that you critique a work just because somebody is trying to make a living, of course, this is precisely what we demand. So a work cannot so easily be judged for that. And I think that if people are producing for the commons, it's still justified to say that they have to make a living. We shouldn't fall back into the idea that working for the commons means working for free, right? Because then we're precisely back to where we started. So that should not be our approach. Having said that, I see that, especially in the Netherlands, but maybe also in some other countries in Western Europe, we see that the whole concept of the commons is now entering the political agenda, which is very interesting because it has not been on the agenda, period, for decades. And so, yeah, there is a certain excitement for that, because it's now coming on the agenda. And this is something we can even celebrate. I mean, this is really an achievement of so many people who worked for a very long time in very specific corners of the commons issue, which is so broad, of course. And the whole question of copyright and Creative Commons is only one tiny bit of all the different areas that this very powerful concept is covering. And what we see is that there's so much we can learn from other people and other realms in which people also try to define, what is common. Just think of medicines and how in biotech or what medical research people are struggling, and this is very, very different from, let's say, people who are dealing with the urban issues, for instance. Very different fields, but nonetheless, it points in the same direction.
My last two questions is about blockchain technology, because that's the latest ubiquitous technology is financialization. So one of your concern is the book about the development of alternative forms of money. And most users now understand the cynical logic of the free in which they're caught. Okay, so this is the age of monetary experimentation,
Yes.
you say. So alternatives are useful mirrors through which we can study the techniques of the mainstream. This is paratactical. I consider it as a paratactical approach. For instance, microcredits and barter, crowdfunding, peer-to-peer banking, time banks, mobile money, and cryptocurrencies are examples of these parallel strategies, you say. Once again, how do you think these financial alternatives can be positioned in relation to the broader critique of global finance?
Yeah. First of all, we make the very simple distinction there between alternatives and, let's say, parallel. So an alternative doesn't claim that it's parallel. An alternative wants to replace, whereas, for instance, on the short term, I would say, if we would manage to build, let's say, parallel money structures, especially for precarious freelance workers, this would really be beneficial. So even if we cannot, take over the current money system, even when it implodes, we build up on the short term a parallel structures, parallel forms of income, parallel forms of value exchange, right? But we also know that this is a symbolic struggle on the level of discourses, code, and protocol, so going down, down, down in the levels on the very question of how we define those architectures. How do we define the social relationships between us? How do we translate those in when we let's say turn them into digital? And how do we then translate them further when we add the value level to that digital level? Because that's where we are now. We are entering that next level where we define the value of social relationships in a digital network. That's the current state. So how are we going to do that? What are our premises, and how do we, for instance, you and I, how do we relate? Are we citizens? Are we users? Are we... Yeah, and that's where the debate starts, and that's where the experiments come in, because each of those experiments define that relationship in a different way and influence the overall debate. And we know from STS and from media studies and from philosophy and history that after a certain period these things calm down. They become a standard, yes, and then they work, right? So there's a turbulent time of change, and we are now in that turbulent time of change when the very question of what money is for grabs, right? We now define what money is. In the past, the National Bank used to do that for us. We could debate it, but in fact we didn't. We took it for granted. Now, this is open, and who is going to define it? Well, that's up to us. Let history judge.
Yeah, we need to first understand that blockchain technology is not a financial technology only, but it can be used in other realms of social life and
Yeah.
everyday life.
Administrative. I mean,
In many ways,
yeah.
so that we can think about other, because since technology is a way of organization, and it is not only about devices. So first we need to understand how blockchain technology is a way of organization. So we need to understand its organization tools to maybe to develop peer-to-peer collective collaboration networks in different realms of social life. Another example is, for instance, for blockchain, and this is my last question, the use of blockchain in elections. But not by a private company, as we have experienced in Sierra Leone, but by a civil society platform, such as Oyla Ötesi, Vote and Beyond. What do you think about this? Do you think it would be possible in the near future so that we can...
All right. Well, for instance, we should just further develop this divide of blockchain as a pure administrative, platform and set of software structures. I would say it's probably not one software, and a blockchain that is now, currently used in combination with a cryptocurrency where the value goes up and down, etc. Right? So one of the first things we do is to let's say build a wall between the two, because I think elections have got nothing to do with value. Huh? So this is nonsense, right? So we should develop blockchains that do not use any form of currencies, right? Okay, so we'll get there. So that is one premise. It's very important, because why should we use Ethereum or something, or a Bitcoin blockchain, to administrate elections? I'm sorry, but this is completely nonsensical. Yes, what is important there is that information is stored, that there is a ledger that it can be stored in multiple places, because it's that distributed aspect which interests us, which is interesting. So we go back to the beginning of the internet, or the core ideology, namely that it's a distributed form of networks, right?
But the hype is on decentralization, not on distribution or distributed networks. The hype is decentralization.
That's correct, but if you look at the dirty reality, Bitcoin is not decentralized. I'm sorry. The majority of Bitcoins is owned by a small group of people, and in the hands, we all know that, of very few Chinese miners who got in early. So sorry, but if you look at the real existing reality of Bitcoin, it is a centralized system. I'm very sorry to say this to you if this is news.
That's part of an ideological discourse again. I mean, because while we are dealing with the central authority, the power of the growing and intensifying even, the power of centralizing central authorities, the hype of decentralization is being instrumental. But it's not distributed, which is totally different.
That's why your approach is, your question is so interesting, because elections, they should, in theory, be anonymous and should be verifiable in a distributed network. However, I'm coming from the Netherlands, and we have some long history with this topic. And funny enough, my friends with whom I started the whole internet business in the early 90s, they were the ones, they're hackers, and they were the ones that, and I was very surprised about that, already in the late 90s started big campaign in the Netherlands against voting machines. They said voting machines that are used are corrupt. We can hack them, and we will hack them. We will, the authorities got luckily very scared about this and made a law that said, in the Netherlands, we cannot use machines for voting. We will continue to do that on paper, and this is thanks to the computer hackers. Yes. So this is still the case, because every time a new model is introduced, the hackers are invited, and within minutes they show that these machines can and will be hacked, right? And as long as this is the case, and this is also a problem a little bit, but with the blockchain ideology, because the problem with Ethereum and Bitcoin evangelists is, for instance, they say that blockchain is safe, that it cannot be hacked, and that it's anonymous, and both of them are not true. So please be aware of this before you start to go out there and preach the religion. Please, be skeptical.
I would like to leave you some time to ask your questions or share your comments as well, so that this would become a muhabbet.
Yeah. Okay, we start there, and the microphone comes here. Yeah?
Let's wait for the microphone.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Evet ya. Türkçe sorayım ben.
Yeah.
Ben bilgisayar mühendisiyim, Big Data uzmanıyım. İşim bu. Bu alanda da çeşitli çalışmalarda Amerika'da da bulundum. Şu an Türkiye'de ya da Türkiye gibi Arap ülkelerinde sosyal medyanın özellikle insanların gazını alan, onları bir şekliyle rahatlatan ve aslında sosyal hayatta dışarıda, sokakta yapacakları mücadeleyi yapmamalarını, bunun önünde bir engel olduğunu düşünen bir yerdeyim. Bu konuda ne düşünüyor kendisi?
Çeviri biraz sonradan başladı. Kısaca
Tamam. Yani sosyal medya sokağa çıkmayı engeller mi? Bu ana soru. Çünkü insanlar sosyal medyada rahatladıkları zaman sokağa çıkmıyorlar.
Yeah, I got the question. Yeah, no, sure.
Bu birinci soru. Bir tane de ikinci bir şey merak ettiğim bir konu. Kendisi hangi telefon kullanıyor? Facebook'a madem karşı çıkıyoruz, telefon olarak şu an ne kullandığını merak ediyorum. Ya o zaman tüm dünya olarak her şeyden saklanıp bir taşın arkasına girmemiz lazım.
All right.
Orada değiliz şu an.
No. Okay. To answer the first question, there's a lot of evidence that social media is not so much distracting people to protest or preventing them to protest per se, but what we see and what is a real problem, especially for social movement studies and for organizers, is that we see that the overall cycle of protests and the lifetime, let's say, of a movement, and Gezi is just an example of that, but there are many others, that the intensity is very strong, and so the collective experience can be very, very strong, but that movements today have very, very difficult times to create sustainable forms of organization, either before, even during, or after the event. And this is a real problem, and the social media are not playing, a constructive role there. The social media, on the other hand, as real-time media, they intensify the time, they compress the time, and they are not creating long-term, let's say, social forms of organization. To answer the other question is, I use Fairphone, but the more interesting question is, I'm not using internet on my phone because I'm an internet theorist and critic. Nobody has ever complained that I was not enough online. So I use the freedom to not use any internet on my phone. So just to have some peace and quiet.
Can I ask? I want to learn about your thoughts. New media technologies, are they presented as simulation world? I am asking in terms of
good question.
Baudrillardian approach.
Yeah, I come, of course, from the theory of simulation. I'm very influenced by someone like Jean Baudrillard. But yeah, I went in a very different direction. I have come to the conclusion that the social media are so good and so prevalent, so pervasive, and so overwhelming and hallucinating for us, precisely because they are so deeply embedded in our social life, in our real, so-called, dirty, real life. Yeah, and so the idea that this is kind of a parallel reality where you can dream away. Yes, there was that idea, and sometimes people, and especially young people, they use some kind. So often use games and for that. And so if we would include, let's say, the world of games, we would really get a different answer. But the gamification of the social media has not happened. Some people have studied this and have proposed this. But that never took off. In the same way as I cannot imagine that the social media, will somehow merge with VR. No matter how interesting it may look on the screen, I don't think this is going to happen. I think because of the huge layeredness and complexity of that the social media, the idea, for instance, because I didn't say that, the social media will and already are incredibly visual experience. The idea that the social media are only text-based, of course, we've left behind, already 10 years ago or something like that. It's really, And my study, my school, is about interface design, and all we do with our students is for 4 years they study that interface experience as a visual experience, right? And this is also where, of course, Facebook has made so much progress in understanding, the subliminal aspect of that.
Merhaba. Ben mesleğim reklamcılık, aynı zamanda Türkiye Korsan Parti Hareketi aktivistlerinden biriyim. Baudrillard ekolünden gelmeniz aslında sorumu da biraz tamamlıyor gibi oldu. İnternet teknolojilerinin potansiyeli ortada, blockchain'in potansiyeli ortada. Bizim zaten sivil toplumda, yani dijital sivil toplumda da aslında karşılaştığımız bir problemle ilgili bir fikir fikir almak istiyoruz sizden. Şöyle ki hani teoride ve aslında sosyal bilimlerde gerçekten dediğiniz gibi büyük bir geçiş döneminden, bir kaos döneminden geçiyoruz ama işte Adorno'nun ya da Baudrillard'ın bahsettiği kültür endüstrisi ve imajların baştan çıkarıcılığına maruz kalmış, 10 yıllardır maruz kalan bir halktan söz ediyoruz aynı zamanda. Yani bu karmaşık teorilerin halka anlaşılabilir ve onları harekete geçirici şekilde aktarılma. Yani ben bir reklamcı olarak bunun zorluğunu aktivist tarafında yaşıyorum. Çünkü internet çok eğlenceli. Google, Facebook bunlar çok eğlenceli. Türkiye'de de üstüne üstlük bunu çok yakından yaşıyoruz. Gezi gibi bir hareketten sonra internetin bu olasılıklarının karşısına ket vurulmak üzerine oluşturulmuş birçok sistematik örgüt ve yapı var. Troller ordusu vesaire. Yani biz bu sivil toplum ve siber aktivist dünyasındaki kendi baloncuğumuzdan çıkarak halka ulaşmanın bir taktiğini nasıl oluşturabiliriz? Bununla ilgili fikirlerinizi merak ediyorum. Tabii ki bir sonuç elbette olmayacaktır ama.
Sure. Okay, well, that's a very urgent question. I would answer it that really it is time for experimentation on a very small local level. And there are a lot of different tools now available. And so instead of, let's say, bringing in a lot of, global technologies, I would really emphasize that today the most successful, let's say, activist projects are absolutely bottom up. They work. They try to bring together groups. Let's even start with small groups, dozens, some 100 people in a community working maybe on same issues in a city, something like that. We see that, especially also in Western Europe, maybe my answer, is biased in that sense, that there's tremendous potential that we are exploring right now on a local level, very, very deep level. And that the way we do this is through local-to-local exchanges. So, for instance, in our case, because we are quite similar, okay, we are a bit Nordic, and the people in Barcelona, they're a bit more southern, okay. But yeah, so we have, for instance, a lot of cultural and technical exchange with Barcelona, right? Because similar city, a lot of tourists, and so on, right? So, for instance, with the urgent Airbnb question, this is really something we can focus on while developing other alternatives and developing also new forms of monetary economy. So that would be my answer.
Also, I find it critical to understand the tactical operation of business. So we need to understand how business models are working, are operating tactically, so that we can reuse and reappropriate those tactics, especially in as activists. So it's really important to, yes, criticize the business models, but without knowing it, we cannot criticizing it. And since we have a data access problem, that's why Geert is saying that we need experimentation. So in order to, while we are reusing and reappropriating that business model, we are also learning it, and we are also sharing that. That's a way of knowledge production, and that's a way of parallel power,
and
power
never
production.
be ashamed, to be too local.
Yeah.
This is really,
and that's
let's
that's
say
what
the hard
we can do
lesson
in
learned.
Istanbul, for instance.
Yeah.
Elbette bunu yapıyoruz ama işte o filtre baloncukları ve yani karşımızdaki büyük şirketler ve devletlerin organizasyonlarını bypass'la ilgili de bir soruya çevirmek istiyorum aslında. Yani buradaki teknolojik altyapı, karşımızdaki teknolojik altyapı gerçekten aşılması çok zor. Bu anlamda hani halka ulaşmak için daha geniş kapsamlı bir bypass gerekiyor.
Yes and no. Yeah, yes and no. One of the weaknesses of Google and Facebook, because of the way they are structured and the very few people they employ. Remember, Facebook only has 6,000 employees worldwide. They have absolutely no local presence, right? And this is their business model, right? So they are proud of their non-presence in the local, and this is precisely their weakest point. And now they're hit by that. But also, I think, if we develop alternatives, this is precisely where we can start, because we don't compete with them, right? So instead of saying, yeah, we're going to develop a new Facebook or something like that, please never say that. Don't.
I mean, that's
don't
what
go
the government
there,
is saying,
right? Because and also because of the uptake of people. If people say, should I should I try this? Because this is our lesson, hard lesson learned, right? If you then they install something and then they find out there's no one out there, so it doesn't work. Well, it does work, but you know it works on a very different scale, right? And if you don't migrate together to these new platforms together, yeah, with a small group, it will never work. If you go to alternative platforms from a consumerist perspective, you're disappointed within 2 minutes. Yeah, so you have to, let's say, enter that space with the social, with your groups, with your friends, lovers, whoever, yeah, comrades. You enter there and you start doing something together. And if you are there with 10, 20, 30 people, that's more than enough, yeah, to really try to reach the goal that you have in mind. And in my view, those things are ultimately, you know, tools. They are tools. And if you have your goal set, the tools will help you to reach that.
It's also important to emphasize this techno-capitalist ideology which runs through utopic or dystopic, revolutionary or destructive or disaster or I don't know, hope. I mean, technology will never save us. Technology is only gives us a way of organization. So it's up to us to deal with the social problems, and it's up to us how we use technology for which purpose, you know. So that's why I find it very important that you make a distinction between alternative and parallel, because as Geert has just emphasized, if you want to replace it, that's a disappointment that you will feel. It's huge.
Okay. Maybe last question?
I would like to ask about, as an alternative, what would you think about the electronic literature? Could be an alternative for a social media giant? Because I'm trying to, as you say, you will fail, but I'm trying to construct a platform with the electronic literature. So I think that can be an alternative yet, not based on social media, but the creativity, the potentials of creativity as
okay.
the tool.
No, I mean that's completely justified, and I just mentioned, you know, that the world of computer games is, of course, perfectly able to build those very strong, parallel narratives. And a lot of people have said, yeah, but you won't have gaming without the integration of the internet and the social media. Well, in part, that's true. But you know, if you look at FIFA, I don't know if you do, but if you play the games, but yeah, it's fun to play. It's fun to play together. And you know, it creates a very, very strong sense of community, of playing this stuff together. So if the electronic literature manages to create its own form of social, it will be successful. If it's just offering some content on the internet, you know, it will very much depend on search queries, on visibility of social media, etc., all on outside forces, right? So what I think is the electronic literature has this kind of social turn still ahead of it. And if it manages to go through its social turn, it will be successful and find readers or, give it a name, users.
Türkçe sorayım. I'm gonna ask in Turkish. Ben perakende endüstrisi için çalışıyorum. Perakende proje yöneticisiyim. ve biraz önce bahsi geçen 2-3 soru üzerine verdiğiniz cevaplar istinaden benim de bir projem var. Kişisel olarak perakende sektörünü iyi tanıdığımı düşünüyorum şu an. Türk tüketicilerinin davranışlarını düzenlemeye yönelik teknolojik bir girişim ve bunu sosyal medya üzerinden ve teknolojik arttırılmış gerçeklik platformuyla düzenlemeye üzere bir startup'a başladım. Bu startup Media Markt'ın kendine 7 Mayıs'ta düzenlediği sunum gününde sunulacak bir şekilde ben de buna başvuru yaptım. Ve siz her ne kadar bu sosyal medyanın içerisinde VR olmayacağını düşünseniz de hani bu derece sosyal medyadaki davranışları düzenleyici olmadığını düşündüğünüzü belirtseniz de aslında arttırılmış gerçeklik yani augmented reality olarak bu uygulamaların insanlara davranışlarını regüle etmesi konusunda bayağı başarılı olacağını düşünüyorum.
True.
Ve bu davranışların sonunda insanların bir reward yani kendilerine bir ödüllendirilme gibi bir mantıkla düzenlenmesi daha doğru olacağını düşünüyorum açıkçası. Ve özellikle Türk tüketicinin en büyük sorunları bunlar. İlk baştaki en büyük sorunumuz bence çevre. Yani global olarak çevre ama Türk tüketicisinin yani bilinçsiz bir şekilde tüketmesi ve çevreyi kirletmesi daha büyük bir sorun. Bu sonuçta çevreye de başka şekillerde yansıyor.
Exactly. Yeah. No. I mean, there is obviously a need for that. I did not use the word AR. I was only talking about, very classic forms of virtual reality. And I said, obviously there will be an integration of AR and social media. I mean, that's obvious. In the same way as Internet of Things will also, somehow play a role in that. And yes, people will be more critical about what they're buying. I mean, the consumer awareness of where products are coming from, what's inside, how much sugar, or whatever concerns they have, country of origin. What used to be all packed, on labels, etc., will soon, become available for ordinary buyers, and this is already the case. So yes, there is an obvious use in that, especially for critical or skeptical, consumers who want to know more about a specific product.
Can I continue with something? I'm going to speak in Turkish again. Geçenlerde bir perakende endüstri danışmanı global olarak tanınan Chris Bey ile röportaj yapma şansı buldum. Ve kendisi sosyal medyayı aslında alışveriş alışkanlıklarımızda beklentilerimizi yükselttiğini ve aslında alacağımız ürünü hakkındaki bilgiyi bizim sosyal medya üzerinden almak, like'lar üzerinden alma konusunda çok büyük bir trend olduğundan bahsetti. Ve bu trendleri aslında iyi niyet davranışları yani ambalaj tüketimi gibi konularla birleştirirsek sizce bu konu hakkında başarılı bir proje olacağını düşünüyor musunuz?
Yeah, but the problem there is really one that cannot be addressed in general terms because we also face at the same time an enormous fragmentation of consumers, of markets, of expectations. So the idea that people in an old-fashioned way just, yes, we buy this because everybody else is buying it. I don't think. I don't think that's going to work. If it is, for instance, done, well, I like it because my best friend likes it, or because it was recommended in one way or another, then it already becomes more likely, because in that way you have those kind of networks of trust that are much closer to you. And this is very likely how also the retailers will eventually, market or target their products. Okay. Yeah. Do
We'll
we
have the
stop?
last question.
Last
or
question?
comment,
Okay, yeah,
Göktuğ?
okay.
Şimdi Google'ın ve Facebook'un kişisel data toplamak üzerine çalıştığını biliyoruz ve bunu kabul ediyoruz zaten hepimiz. Öte yandan bir de telefon için söyleyeyim. Diğer alternatif olarak iPhone var elimizde ve fiyatları daha yüksek. Burada şeyin güvencesini ben kişisel olarak duyuyorum. Bir ürüne para vermiyorsan ürün sensindir de bunu hani bizim bilgilerimizi işleyerek vermediğimiz parayı çıkartıyorlar bizden. Öbüründe parayı verdiğim için zaten böyle bir şey yapmasına gerek yok onların. Ama bu kıyaslamada gözden kaçan bir alternatif Microsoft. Ben şu an fark ettim bunu. Microsoft'un ne yaptığına dair hiçbir bilgim yok benim. Microsoft datalarımızı işliyor mu, bunları satıyor mu? Bu konuda bir bilgim yok. Hiç gündeme de gelmiyor bu konularda.
Okay. No, but I can tell you, Microsoft has successfully moved in the background and is following, the examples of very successful companies before. And Google is well on the way to follow the example of Microsoft and all others before them. Just think of IBM, SAP, Oracle, etc. These are companies that move in the background of the infrastructure and become invisible for us and for the ordinary users. They've made enough money, on the forefront of the technology at the interface level, where they interface with each individual user like you and me. But at some point, they don't need that anymore. And they are big enough, and they can even grow bigger in the background, because we need more and more reliable infrastructure. And this is where the big growth lies. And this is where these companies that you're mentioning are playing a crucial role, but we don't see. And because, I don't know, do you often think about SAP, for instance? No, you have about 10 or 20 interactions every day with SAP, and you've never heard about that company, right? It's huge. It's the only really successful German company, and it takes care of all the airports, buses, and so on. Microsoft is rapidly moving in that same direction, and so is Google. Think of the big smart cities projects and so on. I'm not sure if Facebook will end up there, but that's another issue.
Another abyss.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Geert, for participating.